So I am Heidi Kubin. I'm one of the vice principals on this team. We are from Constable Neil Bruce Middle School in West Kelowna, BC, which is kind of the middle south of BC. And we are a middle school grades 6 to 8 with a population of about 920 students, about 100 staff. And we have a, well, I don't know if it's a unique population, but we, as in lots of schools, draw from a wide variety of families. So if you've ever been to Kelowna, BC, you know it's situated on a beautiful lake. So there's lots of beautiful lakefront homes. And then just across the street from us is also several trailer parks, and we are closely connected with our West Bank First Nations community and have a significant amount of Indigenous students that join us each day as well.
I'm Veronica Reilly-Granich. I'm the assistant principal here at Buena Vista Horace Mann. We are a K-8 bilingual immersion school, Spanish and English, located in the Mission District in San Francisco. We have about 600 students in grades K-8, and we serve primarily a Latinx immigrant community, and are part of San Francisco Unified School District, which is a school district that serves a very diverse group of about, I think we're down a little bit, but around 52,000 students.
So I want to kind of start us off by doing a slight visualization, a little bit of visualization of this idea of brave space, and really consider this now that we're in Zoom with a new group of people, and we're really going to be trying to push on our practice together. So if you wouldn't mind just sitting in your chair, you can put your feet down if you want to, either gaze, or you can turn your camera off if you would like. Sit your back up straight if that's possible. You can sit, stand, whatever works for you. But either focus your eyes somewhere or close them, and your camera being off is totally fine. And I just want you to start with 2 deep breaths. And I want to give you a few moments to get a picture in your mind, a picture of a brave space that you've been a part of, one that you maybe have imagined, one that's really meaningful to you. A brave space where you felt connected to those around you, empowered. Maybe it's a space where you've done challenging, but definitely some of your best work. As you imagine yourself in this space, I want you to notice the level of trust you feel with others. How do you know you can trust those people with you in this space? Does everyone trust in that brave space? What facilitates that trust in that space? I want you to think of your own bravery in that space. What allows you to be brave? What helps you be brave when things are challenging or difficult? Whose voices are heard in this brave space? Is everyone able to be brave? And what would it take for that to be true in that space? I want you to pause and inhale in the sights, the sounds, and the feelings of a brave space. Take 2 more deep breaths. And I welcome you back in. So it is my hope that either you will be able to jump right in to a brave space here with us today, or that you open yourself up to keep pushing on your edges so that you can eventually feel brave in this space. One thing I want to note about this, and since you all have heard of brave space, you probably know this, but just to highlight, we are really, really trying not to be just safe here and push on the little edges of what we do with our pedagogy. Rafa said this to me and our whole group last time. He said, I want to walk toward the revolution. If I think about the idea of walking toward a revolution, especially when we think about issues related to serving kids, that requires our imagination, which is brave in this space to even have these days. And it requires a full openness to possibility. Possibility within myself, but also possibility from these lovely people who you may or may not have met. There's so much here. So I just want you to know it's not a safe space where we're just trying to be, comfortable here and just push a little bit, but throw it out there. Like, let's really get a big pot of spaghetti here. I want to tie this directly to some other practices we're trying to disrupt. And if you know Shane and I, we start the book out talking about the idea of white supremacy culture. And we are all trying to undo all of the colonization that has occurred on our minds and our bodies and our ways of being. So I want to define white supremacy culture and then tell you a few of the behaviors we're thinking about specifically. So if you go to page 41 of the text, this is in chapter 2. And in chapter 2, we argue that fluency is super important when we're talking about these issues, because if you can't talk about it, you certainly can't do it well, whatever it is. So on page 41, I spent some time digging up a good definition, I think, of white supremacy in general. And it's really helpful, I think, for this space because it talks both about anti-Black racism and settler colonialism, which kind of takes into account all our environments that we are in. Is anyone willing to read the paragraph under white supremacy?
I can read it. White supremacy is the global system that confers unearned power and privilege on those who become identified as white, while conferring disprivilege and disempowerment on those who become identified as people of color. While white supremacy is a system of beliefs and structures created by white people, it can also infiltrate the ideologies and actions of people of color as well. Luis Ureta, 2010, explains white streaming begins in schools through a curriculum that is founded on the practices, principles, morals, and values of white supremacy. Aronson and Boveda, 2017.
Thank you for calling out those citations as well. I really appreciate it. And when you all have a little bit more time after, I want you to go back to the anti-Black racism piece of this and the settler colonialism. But right now, I want to stick specifically on that last piece where it says practices, principles, morals, and values. That is what leads us to culture, white supremacy culture. And so now I want to move us, that's the solid definition of it, but let's look at 4 of the elements of white supremacy culture I want us to, and Shane and Jennifer want us to kind of try to focus on as we're going through this together. So go to page 173. 3, you see perfectionism, either or thinking, power hoarding, and defensiveness. I'm going to call out perfectionism, either or thinking, defensiveness, and on the slides number 2, sense of urgency, because it's not listed here. Couple of quick notes. Please don't try to be perfect. Read the rest later. Just don't try to be perfect, okay? It's a really bad idea to try to be perfect. Within that comes the either or thinking. Either you know this, or I know this, or there's this way, or there's that way. No, okay? I have about 15 different ways in this room. And then there's a whole bunch in your other in your classrooms, then there's a whole bunch in your school, then there's a whole bunch in your city, your state, your world. We can't do that. We have to be open to possibility. The second one, defensiveness. All right, especially for my white women in the group, okay? This one can be really tricky, where we really want to protect ourselves, or I can't say we, where there's an idea that it's important to protect myself. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to mess up. I don't want to feel bad. We're throwing that out of the window. And if you feel like one of your sisters is doing that, please gently invite her in to letting that go, okay? Finally, sense of urgency. What we are doing is going to happen on a cadence. I know you have meetings, I know you have to plan, but in this space, we really want to try to focus on doing the untangling and letting it be messy here. Sometimes what we need to do will emerge immediately. That can happen. Sometimes you're going to think about it at the dinner table later and it's going to emerge the next day. And sometimes it might just take some time and then a real idea might emerge. That's all okay here. I want us to resist like, oh shoot, I didn't get all of my listening questions today. Oh my God. We'll get to where we get and I promise it'll be good. As long as we can lean into this, I promise it'll be good. That's a little bit on those, but I left you with the pages just in case you want to dig into those a little bit more. A few agreements before we send you off to start to get to know each other a little bit. On page 3 of your agenda, you will see our offering of agreements. They come from AORTA, Anti-Racist, I think I wrote it down. I like to say there's named properly, Anti-Oppression Resource and Training Alliance. If you are interested, this is where these agreements come from, except for the one in the middle. And their agreements are, no one knows everything, together we know a lot. That speaks to this idea around how we have our voices here together. It's not just me, we are not experts. We are not experts, we are not experts. Collectively, together, we have a lot of expertise. So if we can think in that way, that can be really helpful. Embrace an abundance mindset. We know it's crazy and we have work to do. We've been called to do that work. Our ancestors would ask us to do it. Embrace an abundance mindset. Assume positive intent, but think about impact. Thank you, Shane, for sharing that. I really appreciate it. In this, you may make a mistake. That's okay. You can think about that a little bit, but really focus on the impact you may have had on someone else. And then we can be articulate all the time, especially as after school, like words might get mixed up and all that. Maybe you got a typo, just let it go. It's fine. You might sound real straight, and then the next time you might be like, oh, it's fine. And then finally, center students from the margins and be change. Hey, this work is about us a little bit, yeah, but it's really about the students you all wrote about in the RFP. Our students who are learning English, our Indigenous students, that's who we're doing this work for. So let's keep them at the center, and I promise you, we will find ways to like bring you back in case we're not doing that. So with those agreements in mind, did everybody remember Blockbuster Video? Yes? Okay, 24-hour rental is not on the table today. It's like a 5-month rental. So can you agree to renting these for like 5 months? Yes, thumbs up? Okay, great. We've got a rental. You can return them at the end if you would like, but I hope that you keep them. There's no cost. Shane, if you would not mind, now that we have these agreements and we have some agreement around being in a brave space, let's try that on.
Thank you, Jamila. Would you like folks to take a moment to just jot down for themselves an intention?
Yes, I would. Thank you for reminding me of that. You should do that. Take a second with a little bit of framing I've shared, and specifically the agreements, and write an intention for yourself. Give you about 15, 20 seconds to do that. Okay, Shane.
All right. Thank you so much for that opening. So we wanted to take a moment, felt important to spend a little time getting to know who's in this room together. And we wanted to do that through a community circle. This is a practice we'll come back to. This might be one of the only times we do it all together. It'll probably often be in smaller groups, but it felt important that you guys have a sense of each other, right, on some level. And I love this slide from my colleague, Kelsey Chandler, give her a shout out, around circles as a liberatory and healing practice of building community, a practice that really comes from Indigenous ways of knowing, right? The power of the circle, that in a circle we're all equal and we can see one another. There's no head of state, there's no head of the table, there's no sort of power or coercion happening. It's a chance to hopefully create a little bit of a sense of belonging into this community that we're just initiating today. Build a little bit of trust to be able to do what Jamila called on you to do, lean in, be vulnerable, let it be imperfect and messy together, and then transform power and focus on ultimately student agency and voice, but today really your agency and voice. And that is those ideas in the book that come up in chapter 5, they're really symmetrical ideas, right? Like we believe at our core that we can't create classrooms rooted in student agency and voice unless educators experience agency and voice, right? Those things go hand in glove. And so often we see sort of top-down initiatives like be more culturally responsive, center student voice, and then educators are disempowered and stripped of voice and agency, and we don't really believe it can work that way. So we're going to practice a circle, and I think everyone got the prompts in advance. We did shift the third one just a tiny bit, you might notice. They're on your agenda. I also put them in the chat. And the way I propose to do this is if each person can time yourself for 2 minutes so that we don't run over. So if you have a watch or a timer or something, just put a 2-minute thing on there. I'd love to go back and forth between the schools. So whoever feels moved to start can be the first person. And then if you can call someone in from the other school, that would be really beautiful. And the invitation is to talk about who are you in the world? So your role, and then any identities you carry that feel important to you in this work. Who are the students at the margins of your classroom and or school that you're bringing into and centering in this engagement we're doing together? And then what do you see as an opportunity for you as an educator to grow and stretch through this project in ways that will help you better serve those young people?
Hi, everyone. My name is Elisé Sarceni. I am the principal at Constable Neil Bruce School, and I've just moved provinces. So the province to the east is Alberta, very known for its conservative mindset, and then sent here and love the school I have found myself in. And I guess I am a transplant to some degree in British Columbia, but deeply informed about the excellent work that happens here with Truth and Reconciliation. The students at the margins at our school, I'm just thinking about, if I look exhausted, it's just about the kids we were managing today and trying to be with and trying to get into classes, and they're telling us to f off, pardon me, but it's just really rough. It's and they have so many complications in their life right now. I think all 3 administrators spent the day trying to get these kids into a class and trying to find those safe spaces for them and give them an opportunity. So what we're looking at, just share it quickly, is finding an alternative location on the West Bank First Nation where our kids who are really, really struggling, may have addiction issues, etc., can actually be on their land, and we could support them with teachers over there. And so I think the goal for me as a newcomer, but also trying to build some understanding by the whole staff over time to understand the student story and to think outside the box and close the learning gap for the kids so they can engage wherever they're at. But it's hard work here. And thanks for listening.
I'm Veronica Reilly-Granich. I'm the assistant principal here at Buena Vista Horace Mann. I'm also new to this school. This is my first year here as assistant principal, although I'm not new to the school district. I've been with U.S.A for about 11 years. I am originally an English language arts teacher, and I've done a lot of work with English language learners as well, both in a private bilingual immersion school and then in a newcomer program here in San Francisco for high school students who are newcomers to the country. I'm also a mom, which is, I've got 2 daughters, ages 4 and 7. And I think that informs a lot of how I think about our students. It's really boosted my ability to think about, you know, what would I want for all of our kids if they were my daughters, right? If they were my sons. And so I always felt like all the kids are all of our kids, but it's really heightened that for me. I think about that a lot. So I also interact a lot with the students who don't tend to stay in classrooms as the assistant principal. And I'm often the one who's going to find them to make sure that they're safe. And, you know, really thinking about at all grade levels, you know, how can we engage those students more in the classroom and make them feel like it's their space. So we're thinking a lot about student agency. And I really just want to, I feel like so many things are going on, and I'm hoping that this process will help stretch my ability to kind of stick with one thing and see that through in a way that's really supportive for our kids. So I'm excited to be here.
Nice to meet you. I'm Amanda Liebel. I'm the drama teacher for grades 6 and 8 at Constable Neil Bruce. I've moved from English and socials. I've been at the school for 4 years. I'm also a mom and a wife and all the lovely things, and my own children will be coming into the school, so I feel very connected to the community and the area that we're in. Like Elisé was alluding to the fact of getting some of our students into the classroom, we've just rotated electives, so I've got 200 new students on my caseload this week, getting to know them in a really quick amount of time and build those relationships and trust. I also use the acronym for Brave Space in the drama room so that I can get them to quickly trust in the space and each other and build that relationship with me and their own peers so that they can feel like stepping into the room. And actually that would be the first step, because speaking would be the second step. Getting them in the space is the first. A stretch for me would be even being ahead of that maybe and connecting with those students before the elective starts so that we can establish a relationship before they feel the angst of that class starting. It's a busy school, as most schools are, of course, but 200 and really being able to focus my pedagogy and interweaving that into my daily practice of having micro level conversations is something deeply rooted in relationship building. And I just think that it's meaningful work from the core. So thank you for this opportunity.
Hi, I'm Ana Laura Huitrón Núñez, and I am a Mexican-born first-generation immigrant. When I moved to the United States in elementary school, my parents found a community in their local church, so I grew up in a very religious and strict household, which I think has influenced me to be the rule follower I am today. However, I think it's also me being a woman and being an immigrant that has influenced me to be this person and to try to fit the norm and be accepted. My role at the Buena Vista Horace Mann, I am a second grade dual immersion teacher. 70% of my instruction is in Spanish and 30% is in English. And my students at the margin and my current challenge is specific to my classroom, but I think it relates to the whole school issue, which is engagement. So I have, for example, 2 students in mind, and these students are also first-generation immigrants. They're new to the States. They come from 2 different Latin American countries. And my challenge is that they stay in the classroom, which is great. That's one of my number 1 goals is to always keep the students inside the classroom. But they seem disengaged in the learning. And I know I shared this last time, but one of the students asked like, oh, why do I have to write every day or read every day? Or, another student, when it's English learning time, tends to put his head down or just like play around in his desk. So I'm looking forward to this opportunity to grow, to listen more to my students and what they need, an opportunity to take action, even though I might not have the perfect design, to think outside the box, and to not be such a rule follower. Thank you.
So my name is Jessica Coles. I'm actually a French immersion trained teacher. I'm now in the humanities, so I'm teaching French as a second language. I'm a lifer here at C&B. I've been at the school for the majority of my career. I love it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm really noticing in terms of our marginalized kiddos, we have a ton that arrive with their most basic needs not being met, you know, spiritually, even just, you know, the basics of food and a safe, loving, caring environment and somebody that cares about them. And I have had one student whose story has had the most profound impact on me, my profession, and this kiddo falls into many categories of being marginalized, from race, identity, LGBTQ+. So this kid has been the driving force for what I'm doing. Kelowna is very interesting because we're a very whitewashed community. So I think that also has had a profound impact on me because I have not been given a lot of opportunities to step out of that comfort zone. So I'm very cognizant of the fact that I have underlying biases that I might not be aware of that need to come to light. And, you know, that's kind of our town and our community. And, you know, within our school, you see it as well. I'm really, really excited about everything around student agency and deep listening, because as a teacher, I'm really great at giving unsolicited advice, and I'm not very great at doing that deep listening. And this one kiddo was the first time I've ever stopped to listen. And I know I need work around that. And that story, like, it's really, like, it's honestly shook me to my core. And even just like, I almost break down in tears because this kid's story is almost unimaginable. And to walk in this kid's shoes, I can't imagine because of the privilege that I have. So yeah, this is going to change me as a teacher, and this path is amazing, and I'm very grateful for this. So, but in all honesty, if I'm being honest and vulnerable, without that one kid, I'd be stuck in who I was. So I have to be honest and open about that it took this one kid to make me address a lot of insecurities, I guess.
Hi, I'm Ana Sanchez. I'm the other Ana from Buena Vista, Horace, Mann. I am now the instructional reform facilitator, which essentially means I'm an instructional coach for the school. But prior to that role, I was a fourth grade teacher at Buena Vista for 5 years. Like many of my colleagues here, I've spent the majority of my teaching career at Buena Vista Horace Mann, and I don't plan on leaving anytime soon. My family's from Guatemala. My parents immigrated to the United States when I was 5 years old, and I grew up mainly in Wisconsin, in upper middle class, mainly white suburb outside of Milwaukee. I was usually the only student of color, especially in my AP honors classes in high school. Upon graduating high school, I immediately knew I was not coming back. I wanted to leave. And, you know, made my way to California, where I found my home, and I feel like I found my true community. So I realized in my process of going through college and my professional career that being connected to a Latinx community is something really important to me, especially a bilingual community. So when Buena Vista Horace Mann hired me, I felt like I found my professional home. And the students who I'm most concerned about, or the students at the margins at our school, tend to be our students who are learning English, our students who are immigrants, our students who are housing insecure, our Black students. And I share a lot of the same observations that Ana Huitrón shares. And I think I want to see, or how I want to grow is in being a better listener and in allowing the students to take more control or more agency, or to feel like they have that freedom. And for them to just feel like they can be readers, they can be writers, or for them to define whatever those things are to themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Manana. I have had a great opportunity to have a really mixed background leading up to CNB. So I started my teaching career at an international school in Saudi Arabia, teaching mainly English language learners. And then when I came to this district, I was able to join a social emotional learning team. So a lot of my work and my belief and honestly my identity is rooted in that learning and those beliefs. And now I teach 6th grade humanities as well as reading support. So through reading support, I'm able to see a lot of students in the school and get more exposure to what's going on here at CNB. So the students in the margins in my classroom, I would say what I've noticed just in my 2 years here are the students that are designated. So that means they have learning disability or behavior challenges. And it seems like it's so quick as a habit to just send them out when they need extra support instead of giving that in the classroom. So I think that's been going on for them. I feel that has been going on for them in their like very few 6 years of education, and constantly think like, what is that shaping for them as their identity? So that weighs on me. And then of course the Indigenous, I grew up just 4 hours away. I never had Indigenous education in my school, so it was just huge to see it here and to learn so much. And then new this year for me is also the LGBTQIA2S+ community, who I've been privileged to work with at our school and just learn from the kids who know so much more than I could, but I hope to take as much away from them as I can. And finally, my stretch, I think for me, is my reflection. That's where I need to grow. While I'm reading, I'm reading about radical inclusion, and I'm thinking like, yes, I do that. And then I'm like, well, wait a second, like, do I really? What would someone coming into my classroom say? What would my students say? So just linking that to the deep listening that I've heard others mention is my growth goal.
My name is Rafael. You can call me Rafa. I'm a middle school 7th grade math teacher here at Buena Vista, Horace, Mann. I teach math in sometimes English, sometimes Spanish. It goes back and forth, sometimes Spanglish, I guess. And the student, I check with the student often time. Do you want me to keep talking in Spanish, or do you want me to switch to English? And I pretty much do what they ask me. And that is a bless, I mean, being able to do that. I'm a second career teacher. I was an architect for a bunch of years. But then I switched to my other passion, that is teaching. I was born and raised in Seville, Spain. But my wife is from San Francisco. My 2 children, I have a 19 and another 15 years old boys. They were born here also in San Francisco. We are a bilingual family too, but I am the only one that speaks Spanish. The other people understand Spanish and speak back to me in English, but it's okay. I can live with that. I've been living here in San Francisco for 24 years or something like that. I think, I mean, I really believe that, like Mandela used to say, that education is the most powerful weapon to change the world. And I keep that in my mind because the students who our students are marginalized, and there are students who are just newcomer kids that are English language learners. They're really at the margin. Many of them are having a really, really tough time. I mean, thinking about who are the students at the margin in my classroom, I had a hard time because I have so many. It's pretty much brown English language learners and mostly motivated students who had been underperforming for years. And the opportunity I try to get to grow and stretching, you know, for me, for my students, of course, is keep them motivated and willing to learn. And it's really, really difficult. It's been tough for me, I think for everyone. I mean, we are still in the middle of pandemic and it's hard. But I'm really grateful that we are part of this, you know, program, because I really believe, and I said that to Jamila the other day, that we have to make a big change, and that probably involves changing the way we think about curriculum, the way we think about teaching and connecting to students, the families, and to, you know, ourselves. So.
Hi, I'm Lauren Klassen. I am of settler heritage, and I am not new to Kelowna necessarily, but I am new to CNB. I grew up on the west coast of BC and have kind of like bounced to and from Kelowna since I graduated high school. So it is definitely home for me, but it's the first time this year in September that I started working here at CNB. So I'm just kind of trying to center myself here. So my background, this is my third year teaching and my first year in a middle school. So this is all very new to me. I am a high school trained teacher that has also taught in an elementary school up in Northern Canada, which has also just really been a driving passion for me is teaching in Indigenous communities. So that teaching and my passion of truth and reconciliation has really been a foundation of my practice. So I'm really grateful to be a part of this, just to really pursue that and really have those values brought in. So I am a grade 7 ELA teacher here at CNB 2 days a week, and then I am the teacher tutor in the Indigenous gathering room the other 3 days during the week. So what that looks like is I am working in smaller groups or one-on-one with some of our most vulnerable students. And that has just really opened my eyes, bridging my challenges between being I've talked about this before, but like my classroom teacher brain and my support teacher brain, like I'm finding that I do have to have that's been a stretch for me, kind of not just necessarily different expectations, but just a different role in these students' lives, especially in the gathering room where they are feeling a bit more of a sense of connection and a little bit more engaged, and they feel a little bit more safe. So that's been super valuable to me, and I'm really honored that I've been able to develop that connection with a lot of our students. So I think that an opportunity for me here to really grow is patience with students and patience with myself, I think. And also now I'm just realizing, like, also now that we've noted it, just like that perfectionism and always wanting to say the right thing, like I wrote down the thing that I would like as my growth or my stretch. But to add to that, definitely balancing the values of deep listening and understanding of our students' realities, but also wanting to support their potential and to challenge them. I think is something that I'd love to learn more about and really strive to support our students with. So
my name is Lindy Martin. I teach 7th grade English language arts. I guess that's what y'all call humanities in Canada, at Buena Vista, Horace, Mann. It's my 5th year. I taught elementary for about 17 years before that. And Rafa and I share the same students. And so just like him, it's easier for me to name the students who are not on the margin, than to name those who are. And, you know, okay, so I'm the color that I look, and my family is like basically the Mayflower, except we actually went to Canada first. So last year, my husband and I took Sacred Ground, which is the Episcopal Church's 20-week class on race. And it, you know, talk about dinner table conversations, because he's Latin and I'm very white, and it was difficult. It was very challenging and very difficult. You know, focused a lot on settler colonialism and white supremacy, and you know, all the ills of our society, how our society and how our country was founded. And if I had not done that work, I don't think I would be as comfortable doing this work. You know, they kept asking, what are you doing next? What are you doing next? Well, now I can raise my hand and say, well, I'm doing street data. And, you know, so this will help me continue to work on my implicit bias and, you know, radical inclusion too, because I really tend to wimp out when it comes to inappropriate white people instead of being like confronting or holding my ground. But as far as the kids, you know, I have so many who are having a difficult time re-engaging, because we were home for, you know, 20 months. We were home from March until August, from March of 2020 until August of 2021. And many of them still have not re-engaged. And you know, so with the reading, what I'm thinking is empathy interviews to try to understand, you know, what it is that I'm teaching them that's so boring. You know, like, do you like the subject matter? Because I've been teaching long enough that I feel like I can teach what I'm supposed to teach, you know, benchmarks, which are supposed to be upended, right, Jamila, thrown out, but I can teach those and allow the students more choice. That's my goal, because I don't know how to do that. So I hope y'all can teach me that. Thank you.
We're going to try to get you all into breakout rooms by team within the next 10 minutes to do some initial generating of inquiry questions around your equity dilemma that you kind of wrote into the RFP. But before we do that, we wanted to ground you in a couple of core concepts from the book that come up early on and that feel really instrumental to all of the work we're going to do together. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Jamila, to take us through that.
Yes, and just double tapping on the thank you. You all are amazing. Human, human, human. Love it. Okay, so we started with this idea of brave space, and I know I keep picking on you, Rafa, but this walking toward the revolution thing is really big in my mind right now. And we can't really do that if we just think about the ways we do things, right? We heard Jessica and Lindy talk about experiences they had that pushed them into seeing kids a different way, right? Those experiences are what we all need to meet kids' needs, right? And the way that I'm going to imagine, or at least I speak for myself, when a student has helped me think about things in a different way, they are helping me consider the ways I know things to be true. And then there's transformation from that. The whole idea of that is undergirded by this term, epistemology. So if you go to page 14 to stay in the book, I want to read to you all this specific term, epistemology. By the way, thumbs up or thumbs down. Have you heard this word before? Okay, great, because I didn't hear it till my doctorate, and it took me a long time just to pronounce the thing. But I'll go to that one in a second, Shane, but in the book, page 14, it says, we must explore questions of epistemology, of theories of knowledge. How do we know what we know? Why do we value what we value? What constitutes knowledge, and where does the implicit hierarchy of knowledge come from? We need to demystify ingrained ideas about data that have become normalized in education and orient ourselves to a different conception of knowledge. So then when Shane has the slides that we're using up on page 5, what we are really going to be pushing on together, really in your homework in a big way, the homework assignment, but then throughout this is shifting epistemology. Each of us has a philosophy about what knowledge is, about what's right, about what's wrong, about values, all of those things. And we need to shake that up in order to meet kids' needs. None of us 100% have the exact same background as the kids in front of us. And the further you are from the kids who are in front of you, the further your epistemology is probably going to be, and the more shaking up that's going to happen. And so it's all just about the questions around ways of knowing. How do we know what we know? How do we value what we value? And to give us some theory to undergird this, we want to think about the epistemology we've all been steeped in. And that's what this wonderful scholar, Stuart Hall, would say is Western epistemology, or really, like I would say, white epistemology. And some folks call outsider research white research. And I want to relate this to what Shane does in the book, to data specifically. So right now, when you think about our discourse around data, we think a lot about subgroups, right? Characterizing and classifying things into categories. We think about dashboards. What do the numbers tell us at a very high level? And so that's us simplifying things down, taking a whole society, whole group of kids and putting it into some numbers on a dashboard. Thinking about what's valid and reliable, which is really related to like what we say is true and factual, standard model of comparison. And then finally, our standards, right? What we say everybody needs to achieve. The criteria for evaluating, there's always a criteria to evaluate something. And as I just said, it always comes from a Western way of being. Even for folks who are in Indigenous communities, you are still fighting, Indigenous folks are still fighting for you to add validity to my way of being, even though I have been here forever. Not I, but you know what I mean? We're still fighting for that. And so when we think about epistemology, I want you all to keep going back to this idea, okay, this might be my thought, but is this based on just my ways of knowing, or is it coming from another place, right? So this idea of epistemology, we're going to come back to. What I really want us to be able to do is get into those breakout groups to kind of, I'm going to say, do a light touch on your thinking with epistemology. So you all came here with your equity dilemma. We want you to keep those. We love them from the RFP, right? After this little bit of conversation and what the learning you've had from each other, we want you to think about if you want to change anything to that dilemma. But if I'm thinking about really expanding my ways of knowing, we want you to think about the questions, the inquiry questions that could really help you stay focused on that expansion of epistemology in your challenges. I'm gonna give you an example of this in a second because there's a lot of words, but we want to try to push you to think about the questions you want to explore that are not solely based on what you want to know, but what you feel like your students might be able to show you or what they might want to know. I'll give an example in a second. We're going to put you in breakout rooms to do that, but my point in saying all of this to you is that we're not only going to be trying things over time, but we're going to be trying to expand the way we're thinking about the things we're trying at the same time. Does that make sense? Like that parallel track we're going on? Okay, great. Shane, do you want to go to the examples we have and kind of the purpose a little bit more around the breakout rooms? Before you do that, I just want to give you 2 other pages to reference if you want to think about epistemology a little bit more later. Page 17 will be an important page to be able to go to. Shane and I like to rely on and lean into some Indigenous ways of knowing. So holism is a big place we try to focus on. Really relationality, I would just call out as we're even engaging right now. And then another place that you might want to go to if you want to think about epistemology a little bit more is page 12, which is about cultural wealth. And so when I say different ways of knowing and what we value, a place that we can begin there is with the cultural wealth of other people. So what's the cultural wealth of the students you have in your classrooms that are at the margins? Light touch on epistemology, those are the 2 places you can go to dig in a little bit more.
And just like Jamila already previewed, right, you're going to have a chance to look back at what you stated to be your equity challenge first. So this is the example from Buena Vista. And then to use Post-its to kind of map out, does this still feel right the way we frame this? Do we want to add anything, modify or amplify? And what's the opportunity for us nested inside this dilemma? The second page, this is really the most important one, I think, right? Is what inquiry questions do you want to hold about your dilemma as you move through the equity transformation cycle? We'll talk more about the cycle next time, but suffice to say that that's the tool we'll use to kind of go out and gather data and think about changes and reimagination. And so we just invite you to get really curious. And ask some of those hard questions about your school culture, your pedagogy, your classrooms, your leadership, if you're a leader in the room, that you feel like this process might give you the enabling conditions to kind of do inquiry around, to explore. And then lastly, space and time is more on the logistical side. We're kind of making an assumption that you all will be meeting in between when you see us to continue the work, because it's probably not possible to move through a cycle just with these touch points with us, which is only going to be 5. And so you might think a little bit on Post-its about when can we meet? Is there an idea or a construct or a structure we can put in place?
I think just around this piece around epistemology, I was saying to you all that we want to think about the student lens and what might help us expand our knowledge. And so when I think about an inquiry question, let's think about Buena Vista for a second. You all were talking about students who are learning English and student engagement. I could say my inquiry question is, how do I engage students better? But an inquiry question that I might be holding is, what does engagement mean to students who are learning English? So it positions the student more as the person who is, as the group of people who are going to help me expand knowledge and who I respond to and work with. So that's an example of a question. And then for our other school, which I'm going to have to learn your name, I apologize. I promise I will. But in your context, we were talking about the hallways that you were kind of mentioning to Shane and how students were commenting. You could say, like, how could we change the hallways for Indigenous students? But we think a better question or a different question, see, shouldn't say better, how do our Indigenous learners want to feel when they walk into our schools? It's just a different positioning around our questions. Does that make sense? Hopefully that made it clear.
What are you guys sitting with? Does this still feel like the right shape for this dilemma that you'd like to do the street data work around for the next few months? And what questions feel most important to hold in this moment?
Yeah, I think a lot of our questions were centered around drawing a connection between the medicine wheel and the holism of how to support students with what it looks like, feels like, right? Sounds like, yeah. So yeah, I think we all agreed that a lot of the inquiry questions were, how can we support students? Like, what does it look like for them to feel supported? What does it feel like? When we talked about the gathering space where Lauren is that actually a space that feels supportive for them? And how do we know? We would like to hear from them what would feel most supportive when they're struggling.
My dilemma is that, like, being in that space is that, like, safety, connection, belonging. It's so different from, like, for every student, you know? So, like, that is, like, my biggest question too, because some of them, and it depends on the day, I guess. So, like, that's why I think it's such a valuable question, is just, like, to continue to ask that at, like, various points to every student to see, like, what it is that is going on. Because, like, some students need to express themselves when they go down there, whereas some students, they need to you know, be around people that, you know, they know care about them, and then other students, they just want a quiet space, you know. So
can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yeah.
Might the question there be something like, what would I don't know if it's equitable, what would a radically inclusive design for the gathering space look like that would allow for different types of learners to feel something like that?
Absolutely.
And then just within that, I was sharing, like, after a conversation with Amanda the other day, that I don't always view the gathering space as a positive space because a lot of behaviors arise there, but then upon deeper reflection, are those behaviors coming up because students are feeling safe? They feel safe to let go. So just building that safety piece into it.
I'm going to name that as something like, and you all can modify these. How do we reframe our own mindset and thinking around the gathering space? Feels like another important one to hold.
And then also something I kind of remember is I love this one video I show, and it's Indigenous knowledge. And it's when a kid is in crisis, Indigenous communities envelop and wrap that child in. And so much of how we're trained is the sense of unbelonging, but the answer is always belonging. And I think like that word really resonates across our school, because I think every culture finds belonging in different ways, because, you know, we have so many different cultures feeding into our school, you know, white, some African American, East Indian, Indigenous, like there's a lot of different cultures. So, you know, where does our sense of belonging not necessarily align with their sense of belonging?
Did that get captured on the first page? I feel like that's really important, what you just said. And I'm noticing that the summary of the equity dilemma, as it currently stands, doesn't actually have the word belonging in it, but it sounds like that's a really key part of what you're trying to explore. So how might you integrate that?
Yeah. I just have a question, and it's not on a sticky note, but just thinking, I love the brainstorming and the thinking around the gathering room. And I think my perfect school, like if I just got to, you know, imagine all the possibilities, I guess my question is how, as we build belonging in the gathering room, how can we also do that in our class, all of our classrooms and in our school?
Yeah.
So one question that I put on a sticky note, but then didn't put it in there, is how can we authentically engage our staff? But I guess going further in that, like ideally, I would like all of our spaces to feel like everybody belongs. And I know we are, you know, focusing on some of, you know, the Indigenous and our LGBTQ kiddos and some of the outliers or marginalized students. But I just wonder, as we focus on them, if we could actually build a better sense of belonging for, I don't know, all of our students.
I wonder, did I capture that okay, Heidi? I wrote in the blue post-it here, how do we cultivate belonging in all of our classrooms? And then it seems like you're seeing these things as really connected. How do you kind of get your staff on board with that vision even? How do you orient people toward that as being a goal and move that way?
You know, as a leader, and Elisé, please pop in here. And, you know, there's a lot of turnover in admin, and, you know, kind of new admin comes in, and then it's, okay, now we're focusing on this. And I don't want it to feel like, okay, now this is what we're focusing on. I mean, it would be great if we could get our team to engage in authentic ways, like for their own growth, like for personally, like to, as these beautiful people have demonstrated that they're passionate about it, it's in them. I don't know, I'm just curious how we can light that fire a little bit more, so it's not something that's coming from admin or coming from the district, but it's coming from within themselves.
So I have a couple thoughts about that, if I might offer. One is I really want to encourage you to give yourselves permission to use this series for your learning, and to kind of, for now, set aside what happens with the rest of the staff. Because I think if you're carrying that kind of dual lens, it might in some way like color or distort, like it might add a layer of pressure to the learning that kind of takes away your agency or your ability to be like really, really vulnerable. So that's one thing, is like, be a little selfish. Let this be about the 6 or 7 of you for the next 5 sessions. But then I feel like at the same time, possibly Heidi and Elisé could have a kind of companion inquiry that's kind of what you've articulated. Like that's another wondering is, while the teachers are really looking into these questions on the classroom level, maybe you all are gathering data from teachers about their experience of belonging in the school, about what drives them to want to develop as educators, about some of these larger issues, equity challenges on campus. What do you guys think about that?
That's a cool idea.
I think it's in the works already, not launched yet, but we've been talking about empathy interviews and wanted to model it somewhat by admin doing it with staff, and that hasn't started yet, but it will. And the goal was to have teachers to find time to do that as well with their students.
Yeah, I don't know if this came up, this question is just coming to me now and we're out of time, but wondering about whether and how to communicate to the rest of the staff this work that's happening. Like if there's a benefit to telling people we're engaging in this inquiry process, we hope to bring some of the learning to you down the road, not yet. I don't know if folks have thoughts about that or can take it into your next planning session.
I want you all, if you all want to follow that train around that conflict and tension, you can totally do that. I think there's a lot of richness in there. And also this might help you think about if the dilemma you have is still right. It's like, you don't even have to get to the questions, the inquiry questions yet, but based on where you all are, does it still make sense to have this dilemma, given what you all are talking about?
Well, and I in no sense need to hijack the conversation to that shift. I can talk plenty about this later at school with all of you.
No, but I think it's really relevant, Lindy, because it is true. I mean, we have here like two different realities, right? One is what we want to become. We want to be real educators, real in the meaning that we are really making a change in our students' life. But on the other hand, we have to be professional, right? And we have to do with the existing. We have to be responsible, professional and responsible, and respond to what our people who hire us are expecting us to do, right? So it is true. I mean, the dilemma is right there. Just saying, I don't care what the district or my boss has to say and do what I have to do. I don't know. I think it's easier to say it than to do it, in my view. And we talk a lot about student center and no other staff center. I think one of the keys is that is breaking with that and saying, okay, I have to take a risk here. I don't know if it's going to be starting from tomorrow or today, or it's going to be progressively, or
I'm about to jump in there real quick, and I'm getting ready to push right now. Risk, the risk. Anna, were you getting ready to go there?
I was just gonna say, Lindy, I agree with you. I also feel that pressure, and I think it's part of our dilemma that our English language learners and African American students are not performing at the level that we want them to in these tests that we're prepping them for. But then I feel like that's why we're doing this process, to think outside the box and think of other ways to support them. And again, not be like, I know me, oh, I want to follow the rules, and I'm like, I want to prep them for these tests, but we just have to think of outside the box of other ways where we could support them. So going back to our challenge and our original, our dilemma and our original question.
Well, I just want to say, I don't think it's about ignoring what's required for the test, but I think and I definitely did this as a teacher, so I just want to say I know it's possible. If you teach to more than the test, I'll put it that way, student test scores and engagement rise. So it's not ignoring it, but it's doing better than just test prep. And that really is possible. That's what I did for 10 years as a teacher, and test scores did rise.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off of Veronica and Anna's ideas. Like when I think of something like F&P scores, since that's something how I measure my, our students' metrics on a school-wide level, like are our students advancing? I don't want someone in Ana Huitrón's class to reach second grade level benchmark because that's what second graders are supposed to do. I want them to reach that benchmark because I want them to find that love of learning, that love of reading, because they got super excited by this book and they want to like learn more about mysteries and they want to explore that. Like I want, and then because they get so excited about reading, oh, look at that, they're reading on grade level. So I guess it kind of comes back again, going back to our question, like, is it enough to just say, what does engagement look like for our students? It also makes me wonder, like, what's the role of identity? Like a lot of times, like in our objectives, we'll say like readers will do this. Like in Rafa's class, we want every student to walk in there to feel like a mathematician. Is there something that we want to add in terms of that into the question?
Veronica, I just want to say that you probably know that I have 10 units to teach all over the year, and all three teachers that teach math in middle school, we are all way behind, and so I really know that it's not more than the standards what is going to solve this. I think less is more, and we had to pick what the student wants to learn. And I know that I asked that question today in Flex. Tell me if you want to learn something about math that you are curious about. And one kid raised his hand and say, big, really long divisions. So we have a little discussion about, why to learn that, if it's really useful nowadays that we have calculators in our pocket. And I don't know, we have a little discussion about that. But I think, my goal is that then to tell me not long division, things that they sound coming from, the old days, but something that is really interesting, curious. To open up the world map that is really amazing, wonderful, and really intriguing. So I think it's way more transformative than adding up on top of that. It's my view.
So maybe we could put something in our equity statement about straddling two worlds while we walk through this process, right? Because we're straddling, trying to engage students, wanting them to become lifelong learners, wanting to learn, while at the same time, I've always taught second language learners, and I've always felt like the tests were very, Western Eurocentric, racist, but that it was my responsibility to prepare them, how to beat the test. And so I don't want to feel like I'm just blindly complying to the system, but it's like right now we have to I feel like I have to straddle it.
I know I'm supposed to be the observer in this, but I know our group is so small, and I just want to make sure that we are really focusing on something that works for our whole school, K-8. And that's why I think the focusing more on the engagement is going to be something that we can collaborate around across the whole school. So I'm going to step back now, but I just want to say that.
So a tiny little push as you all guide. I just want to call into the space the either or thinking a little bit around us being professionals, or we can change kids' lives. That's one I want you to just draw your attention to. You can do both. The second is around the idea of the straddling the reality and what is. Those things can be the same right now. And I just want to invite your attention to the either or side of those things and what opportunities we might have if we don't put them in those kinds of binaries. So that's my invitation to you all to think about those things. Is there room to think about that a little bit more expansively? But to also, for Erin, where you all were together around student engagement last time we spoke, sounded like something you all felt was important. So if it still is, I might invite you. Anna gave us 2 questions, and I know we have to go, but Anna gave us 2 questions to consider holding around what student engagement means to kids and what if identity plays a role in how students see engagement. So anyway, since we have to move, I want to keep those 2 invitations, but then a part of you all's homework is going to need to be thinking about some of the questions that tie to that thing you all agree on, that area you agree on. First up, the technical, we have a homework assignment for you all. We started the conversation with epistemology. We want you to dig into that a little bit more. So if you click on the link, I just want you all to be able to take a peek at it really quickly. You're going to see 4 areas or 4 domains related to epistemology. I want you to just take a look at those, sit with yourself for a few minutes, and just respond in whatever way comes up. We're going to be sharing the epistemology maps next time, and it's really to get us to think about the ways we operate and our ways of being and knowing through the agency framework. So that's the technical piece. For my team that I was with, you all have a second piece of homework. You need a little bit more time on your inquiry questions. So I want you all to pick up that conversation in your next interaction and get to just at least 3. You have 2 right now. You can either refine them or add to that. And then finally, we would love, again, back to that, like we're going to get to where we get to. We would love in the chat for you to just take a second and think, what is a question you are leaving with around ways of being and knowing in your classroom? Or what's something that you're taking away or something that is just coming up for you as you leave today? Either one of those is fine. And I will put that in the chat.
Oh, I got you.
Oh, look at that. Thank you.
So Lindy shares a takeaway around either or thinking, putting things in binary terms, which is super seductive and part of that Western epistemology, right?
Anna says, thinking about how I can reframe how I approach issues in the classroom in a way that centers the students first and resisting the need to want to figure it out or find solutions right away. It's just related to what you were just saying. Amanda said, takeaway, how to develop deeper inquiry questions framed with students at the center. Jessica said, the sad reality that many of our students arrive at a place they don't feel is meant for them, like they don't belong. Lindy says, are we to read past chapter 4 before our next meeting? Shane, you have the answer to that question? I don't think so.
I don't think you need to. I mean, the epistemology map is connected to the agency framework in chapter 5. So that might be helpful, but it's not, I don't think it's critical for what we're doing together next time.
Great, thank you. Rafa said, how to start my transition from a linear and relational worldview to a holistic one. Thank you, Sarah. Radical inclusion, what does anything, everything look, sound like, feel like for each of my students? Veronica said, I want to think more about what engagement looks like and how to find out if kids really feel it and when they feel it. This one from Elisé, she said, not feeling rushed to get out of the in-between, rather to sit in it, feel it, to better understand our ongoing adaptive steps. Well, that's what I was going to say. That you all are bringing up really great questions that we kind of have to sit in. As we go through this, I do believe it'll get more clear, but really sit and wrestle with this idea of epistemology. And even as you were thinking about your ideas of epistemology that you brought to it, I think there's going to be a lot of deep learning there. If there's nothing else, Shane, well, actually, do you have anything you want to add before we close out?
I'm really excited. I do want to agree with this idea of like sitting in the discomfort of not having a solution, the discomfort of not even having like a practice yet. And know that in exploring your relationship to ways of knowing and being, that is an action step that is related to what you're going to be doing at the classroom level. Trust that there is a purpose for that. It will help you understand it next time. And to that end, we'll share with you our epistemology maps. Jamila and I will send them to you so that you have examples, because we've both done that exercise. It's really illuminating. So we'll make sure that you have a couple examples. So thank you all.